What is up, guys? Delboy here, bringing you a quick preview and prediction for Ted Cheeseman versus Asinia Byfield. This fight is for the vacant British super welterweight title, and it's got a lot of hardcore fans in the UK very excited. I really like this fight. Credit to both men for taking it. Before we get into the video, apologies, I think I sound a bit coldy. Coming down with something. I will try and do as many previews for this weekend's fight as possible, but yeah, not really feeling it at the moment. But Ted Cheeseman versus Asinia Byfield, love this fight. I think the fight is pretty well matched, but Ted Cheeseman is rightfully the favourite. For my money, Cheeseman has been more active. Not only that, I think overall he's fought a better level of competition. You know, Carson Jones is the standout victory on Ted Cheeseman's resume, and for my money, Carson Jones is better than anybody Asinia Byfield has been in the ring with. I think Ted Cheeseman has proven himself a little bit more than Asinia Byfield, but ultimately he's still a prospect, right? He's still a guy who has a long way to go. He is still very young. Asinia Byfield is the type of guy who, he's not usually the type of fighter a prospect like Ted Cheeseman will fight. You know, usually these type of guys are avoided and kind of swept under the rug. That's why I give Ted Cheeseman a lot of credit for taking on this fight, because he could have easily used excuses like, well, Byfield doesn't sell tickets, nobody knows who he is, he's not really beat anybody to get a British title shot. You know, he could have easily, came out with lame excuses, but credit to him, he's taken the fight. And, a lot of fans are excited. Byfield is the type of guy who, he's got an awkward style. He's like long and rangy. He's kind of herky-jerky. Good jab, good counter-punching. Comes in at angles. Really hard fighter to read, actually. Domestically, I think Byfield gives a lot of guys problems at 154. I really do. But, going into this fight, I will say I think he does have a few things going against him. Firstly, Ted Cheeseman has been very active since he's turned pro, and Asinia Byfield, he's not been active the last 12 months. In fact, the last time Byfield fought was October the 7th, 2017, and by the time this Cheeseman fight happens, he would have been out of the ring for more than a year. So, Cheeseman has been very active, he's been fighting okay competition of late, whereas Byfield hasn't been in the ring. That could affect him in this fight, especially late on. Could affect his timing. It could affect his whole game in general, really. So that is one negative going into this fight for Byfield, because I think he is a rhythm fighter. If he struggles to sort of maintain his rhythm and actually find his rhythm, he could struggle here. But let's say Asinia Byfield is at his best, I think he will give Ted Cheeseman a lot of issues. Byfield, he can do everything pretty well, but for my money, he's like an awkward counter-puncher. He likes to go backwards when his opponent's coming forward. He likes to walk his opponents onto big shots and, do damage that way. We saw that against Sammy McNess. Sammy McNess was a good prospect at one point, and Byfield really put a beating on him. He exposed McNess's defensive flaws, and he got the stoppage victory. Ted Cheeseman naturally is a very aggressive fighter. He's a front foot fighter, and he does that very well, but coming forward, he does leave openings, he does leave gaps. Defensively, Ted Cheeseman coming forward is hittable. We've seen him get hit in fights in the past already. So I feel the openings are going to be there for Asinia Byfield, and I think he has the quality to take those and actually take advantage of Ted Cheeseman's defensive vulnerabilities. I don't think he's going to have an issue landing shots regularly, but it's how Ted Cheeseman responds to that. If Ted Cheeseman isn't really troubled with what Asinia Byfield has to offer offensively, then he might actually just come forward and outwork Asinia Byfield on the front foot and beat him up and maybe take him out late on. Because Byfield is a guy who, for my money, it looks like he could be outworked. It looks like if you apply steady pressure and, maintain a good work rate, he might fold. That's just the impression I get, personally. Ted Cheeseman brings good volume. He applies pressure pretty well. He's got relatively decent punching power, good combination puncher. He's got a knack actually for counter-punching on the front foot, which is a skill not many British fighters have. There's a lot to like about Ted Cheeseman's offensive game when he comes forward. Yeah, I know there's flaws defensively, but in terms of his pure offense, he's actually quite skilled, you know. And I think he might actually have a bit too much variety, a bit too much creativity, and a bit too much intensity for Asinia Byfield to cope, mainly in the second half of the fight, because like I said earlier, Byfield hasn't been active. So if this fight is drawn into the late rounds, maybe that favours Ted Cheeseman due to his style, due to his activity rate. And does Asinia Byfield have the power to stop Ted Cheeseman? There's no reason to doubt Cheeseman's chin yet. He looked a little bit uncomfortable against Carson Jones at times, but I don't think Asinia Byfield hits as hard as Carson Jones. So, you know, I can't really see Asinia Byfield knocking Ted Cheeseman out. The only way I could see Asinia Byfield stopping Cheeseman is by cuts. Because one thing I will say about Ted Cheeseman going forward, he has defensive flaws, which is one thing, but it looks like he's got very fair skin. And it looks like he's got the type of skin that is going to cut very easily. And maybe, you know, that becomes a problem at some point. So that's something to bear in mind, you know. I'm not saying Asinia can't stop Ted Cheeseman, but I don't think he can, like, knock him out, if that makes sense. But, you know, that fair skin could be something to worry about going down the stretch also in a long, tough fight. But ultimately, man, I think Asinia is going to start well. I think he's going to be very competitive early on. I think he's going to be giving Cheeseman all he can handle. But I think Cheeseman, he's got the backing, he's got the momentum, he's got the offensive quality, he's got the punch output, he's got superior punch power. I just think he's got more things going for him than Asinia Byfield, personally. So I think this is going to be a very good fight. I'm not ruling Byfield out by any means. I think he can win this fight. Maybe he could outbox Cheeseman, but, you know, I just back Cheeseman here. I think he's got more things going for him. You know, I really, really do. But it's a great fight. It really is a great fight. One I'm thoroughly looking forward to. And this card in general, I've got to say, before we go, it's a very good card. A really good domestic card. I'll briefly run through some of the fights that are on there. Ryan Doyle, he is going to be fighting Jordan Gill. Ryan Doyle is the Commonwealth Featherweight Champion. Ryan Doyle won that belt against Reece Bellotti a little while ago in an upset victory. He defends against prospect Jordan Gill. Jordan Gill has been kind of on the periphery for quite some time now. He's like 21-0, not really fought anybody of any note, but you know, this is his first really big step up, and it's going to be interesting to see how he handles Ryan Doyle. Ryan Doyle does hit quite hard for domestic level. Also on the card, John Ryder is going to be fighting Andrei Sirotkin from Russia. That's a decent fight. That's going to be an interesting stylistic matchup. John Ryder, as we know, he likes to come forward, nice tight guard, and he'll like to try and walk you down. Sirotkin is more of a boxer, so I think it's going to be like a cat and mouse type fight. I think Sirotkin's movement will give John Ryder some issues, but Ryder has the home crowd behind him. He has the hometown, you know, maybe hometown judging, hometown officials. I'm leaning towards John Ryder in that fight. Isaac Chamberlain versus Luke Watkins at cruiserweight. Both guys coming off losses to Lawrence Okoli. That is a good crossroads fight. The loser of that fight would really be in a bad spot. That's why I like that fight. You know, there really is a lot on the line for both guys. So credit to both men for taking that one, because, you know, both guys could have bounced back against journeyman in 6-rounders. So credit to those guys for getting that on. And lastly on the card, Felix Cash, who is a middleweight prospect. He is going to be fighting a guy called Stephen Danyo for the vacant WBC International Silver Middleweight title. Felix Cash, you know, a few people in the trade rave about him. I've not really seen enough yet. From what I have seen, he doesn't impress me that much. He seems okay. I think he'll get to domestic level, but above that, I'm not so sure. I've never really seen Stephen Danyo fight, so who knows what's going to happen there. But that's a really good domestic card. Really, really like it. How do you guys see Byfield versus Cheeseman? How do you guys see that one going? Peace.